Welcome everybody to the magnificent first ever solo show with Isabelle. My very good friend Isabelle Young. And I'm very proud to have her here because you're first and foremost a good friend from quite some time ago.
10 years?
10 years?
2019? Sorry, 10 years.
And you're also a pretty decent photographer.
Thank you. Very long.
You're an amazing photographer, and I've admired your work for a long time. Maybe it's only been in the last few years, though, that I looked at it as closely as I did now, and recognized also, or maybe it was like almost a light that switched on, how great your works are. And so I'm very proud to have you here as a friend, and also to have you here as an artist, and to be the host of your first solo.
Very exciting.
Yes, I'm very excited, and I'm sorry I'm speaking English. Isabelle is from London, and
Does not speak German or Swiss.
yeah.
But you know, maybe time.
Yes, maybe in time if you come back. But if you have any questions or want to have a translation, please let us know. Let me know. You have recently graduated at Royal College. It's very, very fresh.
Yeah.
And you've went through a level of, I guess, education, or intensified what you already knew there. And we're bringing here a body of, not just one body of work together. Here we're bringing a few bodies of work together. And I'd like to think it's like almost like Isabelle's best of. It's like the last 4 years sometimes of works, from different locations across different series. I had the honor to be allowed to Isabelle's studio not too long ago, and really go through the work. And thank you for letting me.
I'm sorry, I kept bringing more out, which wasn't helpful.
Yeah, and I finally made a choice. She was like, oh, and there are also these, another 20.
Yeah.
But I think I had a bit. I saw something in the work that you see here. I see it also in the others, of course. But I think they share many of the works, which I find quite interesting also as a photographer already at this young stage of your career and a recent graduate. They're quite recognizable. But in a way, or there's something they share, and there's a quality they share, I think, from a formal point of view. And for me, I was really driven to find the works that spoke strongest to me, where this formality and the palette of colors is really comes out strongest. So that's why I said best of, but that's maybe my best of or our best of. But we try to group them a little bit, and I think for me there is one way you photograph. That's why these series come about. They're on one side, they're related to certain areas which you travel to, which you're going to tell us a little bit about in a second, once I finish talking. So it's the areas. They're from various different areas, Italy, Germany, but in Italy, various different locations. And you photograph locations which inherently have their story in it, sometimes iconic buildings, sometimes iconic places, which tell stories on their own, just the sheer, I guess, aura, you'd call it, of these areas. But what I find so fascinating that you find these angles, these corners, these close-ups, you have an eye on these places, and inject a bit of your own story. I don't know if it's your own story, but you at least, when I look at these works, it often immediately suggests a story, a narrative. I often feel like there's something has just happened, and now it's the aftermath of that what just happened, or something is just about to happen. There is something luring, there is a presence there, and so that's the story I'm telling myself when I look at the works, and that's the story maybe I could tell to others. But there is a story that you could tell, and there is a story that many of these places already have in them. So I'd like to know a little bit more, and hopefully everybody else also, about some of these locations, and maybe some of these stories related to these locations. Shall we start over there?
Yes, that's a good idea. Well, to introduce, thank you so much for that introduction. It's amazing. The work also is all shot on film, which is very important to me in my process. I've never really used digital photography. I learned film at school, developing my own films from quite a young age. And that process of not seeing what I've shot is really important to the photographs I take. I love not seeing, I love not knowing, and I love that every work is almost like a risk, but I also know what I'm doing. Like with a digital camera, I'm never going to understand pixels really, but when I'm exposing a negative to light, I'm really aware of what that's going to look like or how it's going to feel, because with film you have to be good at light, you have to know what's going to come out and what's not. Like the one with the ashtrays, for instance, is in a very dark pool hall, and I shot it handheld. You know, that's the kind of image you should really have a tripod with, but I love pushing what's possible, and I hate using a tripod because the camera very much becomes part of my body when I'm in these spaces. And I often think of choreography and dance when I'm photographing, because of the way I'm often crouching down, or whenever I photograph particular architectures or bathrooms, the best view is always in the bath. So I often get in the bath. And there's often little moments like that where you interact with your body in a space that is actually quite intimate to get these sort of shots that are in the interior spaces. But as Fabian said, there's a mixture of works across series. I am part Italian, and I live partly in Venice as well, where I spend a lot of time. I spent the autumn term of my MA living there and studying online last year. And my Italian sort of background has really informed my eye. And my family are from Turin in the north, so a lot of my work is based in northern Italy, around Milan, Lombardy, Piedmont, and Venice, the kind of areas I know the most. And so these three works start from the series I called Northern Italy that began in 2018 and was a year travelling across these regions, and a summer I spent there. And my work is very led by architecture and interiors. And as Fabian said, there are sort of, I'm glad that there was a feeling of stories in there, because I studied English literature originally, that's my background. And I'm very influenced by, in English literature, the trope of the country house, the way it holds a narrative, and the way that windows and perspectives can alter what you see or don't see or misunderstand is very key in literature. So that's always kind of in my head, not showing, kind of giving an insight into like a possible corner. And I think I really do repeat this composition of something blocking and then wondering what's going on around there. It's kind of repeated quite subtly in a lot of my work. But that is why I'm sort of drawn to the interiors and what they might hold, but they're never portraits. I don't like portraiture. I like photographing buildings that don't look at me. I like being the only one that can see in the space, and when I have done portraits, it's very direct, being looked at. You know, I don't like it.
What is it called again?
Pardon?
What was the literature called again?
So like the English country house.
Yeah.
So like when they hold narratives and the way that a building shapes what happens. Like how people might meet in a hall or might see something out of a window. And the novel Atonement by Ian McEwan is very key to me, and that's shaped around what a child misunderstands seeing as an attack, but it's actually sex, and that ruins someone's life.
Oh, wow.
So that really influences how, and you know, again, literary narrators who don't say what they mean. I think we talked about this as well, about English and Swiss. The English are wonderful at not saying what they mean. It's who we are. We have a whole language and culture evolved around not indirect.
Yes.
And masking what we really want to say, and I love that. And I really, that's
And
what my work is very key to.
One thing can mean many things,
Yeah.
which I also admire in the English
And
language.
that's why like poetry is a big influence, because it's so shaped around moments and little details. Like Philip Larkin, who was a brilliant poet but a terrible photographer. It's quite interesting. He was very into photography, but they're really bad. But his literature and his poetry, you know, poem is very photographic. It is all kind of broken moments. So that's kind of where I've come from. And there's a quote by Larkin where he says that the sun destroys the interest of what's happening in the shade. And I love that. It's like what everyone is looking at, but then you turn around and look at something else. And that's kind of what I try and do. Because a lot of these spaces...
Can you just repeat that quote again?
The sun destroys the interest of what's happening in the shade. And because I photograph quite a lot of well-known locations, it could be quite a challenge to find something new in them, and that's again why I shoot on film, because you can't repeat film. You could repeat a digital shot, but a film is reacting to the sun and shadow and light. It's never going to. You're never going to be able to repeat that. In a similar way to a painting.
Exactly. I think the painterly aspect we spoke about this in the press release as well. I think is really fascinating to me. How you compose a picture. I mean, it's partially maybe a certain good understanding of classical training, but also it's intuition. Every painter has that somehow. They know what the right frame is, and I think that's fascinating to me. They are composed, set up like often like paintings.
I think painting is also my biggest influence, more so than photography, I think. And with film, again, you achieve that softness, and you mentioned the word palette, and I really do think of having a palette. It is very consistent, apart from the work on the left with curves, which is actually Los Angeles, and that kind of jumps and pops, but apart from that, it is cool. I mean, then Italy does have a palette of greens and pinks and tones, so materials, physical materials, do kind of come into what I see and what I kind of align together. So although, most of the work is Italy, this one is also Los Angeles. And I loved going there because knowing Italy so well, it is such a pastiche of antiquity, that country. It is incredible. Like you go up to these columns that are modelled on marble and you'll tap it and it's hollow. It's just plaster. And it's just this constant pastiche of age that they're sort of yearning after, that Europe has, obviously.
How do you find these details? I mean, you said, of course, before. So we see a lot of architecture, but we see interior, as you said. You're fascinated by it. How do you find that moment of intimacy? By the way, I also may need to say that the title is a very layered, convoluted, incredibly intelligent title, obviously. No, but it is a funny title in a way, as it is several layered in several ways. In camera is an expression in Latin, but it's also Italian, and it means in private, in a room.
In Italian it means in a bedroom, but it's a legal phrase. To be in camera means to be in closed chambers, in secret, in private. But then of course it relates to the camera itself, which is like a room.
As well.
Because when you open a film camera, it is like a room. It's even sort of hexagonal, like a stage. So it is that feeling of you are captured. Often if I'm photographing something, what I'm photographing often reflects the architecture that's inside the camera itself. So. It really relates.
And that intimacy, that in private, that you sometimes gain access to these places. You are photographing these very tight angles and very close-ups, incredible close-ups, but there's still so much happening around there.
And I think that also because the phrase in private, all these moments are a way of being private in public spaces. Quite often there's a lot of people around me in these pictures. Actually, most of these, not so much, but they are in public places. And I like being private. I'm quite an introverted person. I like being on my own. So when there are lots of people around me, it is kind of a way of just having my own moment in a kind of meditative sense almost as well. These are all actually pretty private spaces that I did photograph, but there weren't many of these, but often there are places like the Villa Netchi one over there in Milan. There were people kind of around me. But it is sort of a way of putting blinkers on and shutting off the world. That's maybe partly why I focus on details.
What I also find quite fascinating is this like almost symbolic character some of the photographs have. So it's as we look back maybe at the English language again and the poetic language you found or you have with your works, and there is they could suggest almost a little bit something else, but that goes back to that narrative that I might project into the works. Because I was so fascinated with this, the way you captured that light there in Venice onto this wall there.
Yeah.
And then it reminded me of a flag, of almost an American flag, which is probably completely unwanted.
Yeah.
But I see that.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see that at all.
But I see that in so many of your works, and I think that's a particular quality. That you inject life into some very stable objects, things. I mean, even that little canopy. I feel like it's just sort of like put its head around the corner to kind of look at us a little bit. And I see that in many of your works. You feel like you inject a certain aura into them, which I find really interesting.
There is, I guess that.
The books for me come to life, and they're so static. Everything, most of the things you actually photograph is very static, very still.
But the place itself might not be, so it's a way of slowing it down. It isn't perhaps. I mean, the bed as well. This was taken in Venice in an artist studio that I was staying in. The artist studio is something I'm very intrigued by. Like most of us, it is a very intriguing space. I'm very intrigued by the female artist studio, the sort of space of intimacy, and I know lots of artists who would never let someone in that space, and I was staying there on my own, and it was enormous, this space. It was absolutely vast, and I didn't really know what to do with my bed that I'd been given, so I sort of shoved it into a corner by the window, and outside is the water and Giuleco and the boats going past. But it suddenly felt monumental, and the duvet became kind of like marble. So
well,
again,
it's marble, it's also almost like a figure on the bed as well.
Yeah, totally.
That's what I mean, you have that in many of the work somehow.
And I did actually take some self-portraits of myself in the bed, and I don't like them. I have tried a bit of self-portraiture, but for me, I am in all these anyway. I prefer the body not being there because there is so much sign of the body there without it being direct. So again, it's always trying to, and this is a photograph in the painter Celia Paul's studio, where again I did photograph her, but it was more about her through her space and her through her interiors and what they say of a person. Interiors and incredibly personal and intimate and very sensual.
So Celia is a very well-known painter, maybe not everybody knows,
British
but
painter.
British painter in London. Her studio is near the
opposite the
British Museum, and she's very dedicated to painting.
Yeah.
There's not much else in the room other than
it's a true artist garret kind of part of this.
And this sofa.
Yeah. And then they must have been there for 30 years, those cushions have not changed. But they bear the signs of all their usage or the pressing of the body, so the body is there. And
this I find super fascinating. This is the what is it called? A morgue?
Ossuary, which comes from ossuary, which comes from Latin for bones.
So it's in Modena. There is a cemetery, and then the urns are being kept in there.
Yeah, on each level. So it's a cube, and it houses ashes.
Yeah.
And it's designed by an architect, Aldo Rossi, who finished the project about 78, but he's passed away, so it was never actually finished. And Modena is it's in Reggio Emilia, it's where Ferrari is based, it's all about urbanism and modernism. It was a very dynamic town at one point, and he was very influenced by the painter Giorgio de Chirico, and when you're standing there looking at this cemetery that he curated, so actually it's next to a 15th century cemetery, which is very traditional, and then you've got this insane modernist movement that love just flown in from another planet. It's so bizarre that he was allowed to do it in the first place, but it's remarkable, and I was very aware of flattening it, and I think I often like to do that, I flatten my subject, so you lose creation of the space.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of bring it back to.
And again, so painterly here with this kind of cloud, as if these last touches of the sky. Fantastic. This is the same place there, right?
Yeah, that's also the same place. And that's all inside there where tombs are kept on the shelves. So it's. Yeah.
How much is it modernity and minimalism a little bit of an influence for you, or something you looked at? Because I find it fascinating how you find these formerly modern type of shapes in everywhere, pretty much. I mean, even with by the way, for the Swiss, this is a Zumthor building there. In, where is it?
Cologne.
Yeah.
Museum in Cologne, which developed from a cathedral that was bronze, so he built Zumthor, sorry. Rebuilt it from this cathedral, and it is like a cathedral to art now. It's remarkable, but
even there you have this the modernist touch with.
But it is, but then it's what's left that predates modernism.
Yeah.
So it's modernism posed on like parts, maybe.
Yeah.
It's kind of. I mean, this is not modernism, but it is now because it's rusty and it's painterly. So.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about your formats?
The scale? You mean?
Yeah, the scale.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. No woman has ever told me to print big, but lots of men do.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I get it. I've kept a sort of mental
not surprising
tally, but at art school, I mean, lots of other male photographers are like, yeah, get big, and I'm like, no. And I think I was very influenced by Francesca Woodman, who always prints incredibly small, and that's always been her format. And you know, from knowing her curators or people are like, oh, I wish it was bigger. And I love that it isn't. It makes you like when something's small, you look closer at it.
Yeah.
You spend more time getting quite intimate and up against it. And you know, photography as an art form is one of those mediums that shares so much with the page and the book, and the intimacy of the individual looking, which painting doesn't. Other mediums and formats don't. Whereas photography, you can hold it in your hands and be quite private with it. So I like small. I like printing small.
It's really interesting that you said like the bed and this kind of like the self-made bed in the studio. You felt that this scene was monumental, and it's next to like the most monumental architecture that you photographed. So
maybe when it's smaller, I'm okay to go big, but when it's really big, I'm going to really reduce it.
No, it's really interesting.
This is the biggest I've ever printed a work, and it's quite. It was the right moment. The work dictates its scale. It really does. It's hard, and that is a really hard thing about being a photographer. You have to choose when you've done it the scale. It's so hard. It doesn't really get much easier. Well, with some work it does. I mean, this is quite a collective series, so it does. But then, it's hard. I like small because they are intimate moments, and I'm trying to create intimacy in all the subjects. So the small scale does, I think, encourage that.
I just wonder how you work. So are you really planning to go to these places and really take the pictures, or are you walking around with a camera constantly and waiting for the right pictures?
You're a detective, you know. You're kind of you're trying every door. I mean, as a woman, it's dangerous, but it's also kind of okay. Like there are spaces I can go as a woman, and I know I'm not a threat. So I use that quite a bit. I could be threatened, of course, but they are quite committed. I do a lot of research. My work has become a lot more research-based since I started from my MA. Like at the moment, I've worked on a big project in Venice about flood sea defences and the threat of water, and that was a year of research. But then alongside that, loads of pictures happened that I didn't plan. So there's a duality, and I love those pictures. Maybe more, I don't know, happy ones, accidents. So yeah, there's a mixture. So you plan and then you let the accidents come in a bit. Well, thank you so much.
Great, Isabelle. Thank you so much.